This is a visual representation of how a transversal, when it cuts a pair of parallel lines, what kind of angles in their relationship to one another are formed when that happens. So I guess the first thing that we need to talk about are one parallel lines. Those are two lines that go on and on forever, and they never intersect each other. They're going to either one, it'll be told to you that these two lines are parallel to each other, or you may see it visually denoted by having arrows on the lines like this. If the arrows match, then that means that those two lines are parallel to one another. The first vocabulary word we need to talk about, though, is going to be this transversal. So this line right here that I'm tracing green, that is our transversal. That is a line that cuts two parallel lines. And that is how we are going to, it forms a lot of different angles. And the relationship between the angles that are formed is what we're going to be talking about here um, for the vocabulary part of this. So just remember that the parallel lines, either one, you will be told that they are parallel, or two, they're going to be marked visually, represented by these arrows. If the arrows are the same number, then you know that those lines are parallel to one another. So two things that you definitely need to make sure that you are aware of. Corresponding angles, those are our first ones. So they are congruent to one another. Corresponding angles are at the exact same spot, but just on the different parallel line. So if I were to take my transversal and I were to cut it in half right here, and I slid this part up, this dot and this dot would land exactly on top of each other. So they are corresponding. Those angle measurements are going to be congruent to one another. So if this was 100 degrees right here, then that means that this angle right here would also be 100 degrees. So we just need to remember that corresponding angles are congruent to one another. Another set of angles that are going to be created when a transversal cuts a pair of parallel lines are we're going to have alternate interior angles. And what that means is that these angles where these dots are, is they are inside the parallel lines. It's kind of like if this was an Oreo cookie, this is all the cream, okay? And it is on the inside of it, but they're on different sides of the transversal. So yes, they're in the good part, the yummy part of the Oreo, but they're on different sides of the line. That's why they're alternating each other. These angle measurements are also going to be congruent to one another. So if this angle right here was 75, that means that this angle right here is 75. Now that gives us some more information that you should be able to start figuring out. We need to remember that the measurement of a straight line is 180 degrees. And sometimes we get confused on why it's 180 degrees. The best way that I can tell you to explain why is that we know that a circle is 360 degrees. If we start all the way up here at the top and we go all the way around, we are moving 360 degrees around that center point. Well, if we cut our circle in half and we have a semicircle, half of 360 degrees is 180 degrees. So that's why we know for sure that this measurement of one straight line is 180 degrees. Now, if we know that this measurement is 180 degrees on this line, it's true on this line as well, and we have a measurement of 75 right here, how do we figure out this part? What could this measurement of this angle be? It would be the measurement of the line, so 180, take away the 75 that we know, it's 105 degrees. So now you can fill out this is 105 degrees. And it's on the inside. It has another one right here. That's another alternate interior angle that is also 105 degrees because they are congruent to one another. The cool thing about knowing all of these terms and seeing where the angles lie is given one piece of information, you're going to be able to find out a lot. You're going to be able to problem solve and take puzzles apart and be able to find out angle measurements for a lot of different things, even if you are just giving a little bit of information. So alternate interior angles, remember they are on the inside of our Oreo and they are congruent to one another. So the angles on the opposite side of the transversal, they are congruent to one another. So alternate exterior angles, they're also congruent to one another, but they're on the outside of our Oreo. They're on opposite sides of our transversal still, but they're on the outside of the Oreo. So they're on the cookie part. Those angles as well are congruent to one another, and that means that this angle over here that is created is going to be congruent to this angle right here that is created. Now, supplementary, we just talked about that a little bit up here. Supplementary means that they're two angles and they add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so if they're on a straight line, we know that a straight line has to be 180 degrees. If you know one of these measurements, let's say that this measurement here, this angle is 80 degrees, and we know the whole line is 180 degrees, we know that this measurement over here is going to be 100. In turn, that means that we can fill out this measurement and this measurement. We'll be able to fill out more information. So just remember, supplementary line or angles are not congruent to one another. In fact, they add up to 180 degrees. Vertical angles. These are the angles that are right across from one another on a transversal, and they are from a transversal and a parallel line, and they are going to be congruent to one another. So we have this dot, and they are congruent to one another. Well, we also know that the alternate exterior angles are congruent to one another. So we know that this angle measurement right here is going to be congruent. Let's see if I can make that a big dot for you. So this angle measurement right here is going to be congruent to it. Oh, we also know that alternate interior angles are congruent. And look, it just created another vertical angle right there. So we know that all four of those angles in this set of parallel lines cut by a transversal are all congruent to one another. And the last set of angles that you're going to need to know are called consecutive interior angles. These are angles that are on the inside of the parallel line, but they are on the same side of the transversal. And those are supplementary as well, which means they add up to 180 degrees. My marker's still big. So you need to remember that all of these angles are all going to be congruent to one another except for supplementary and consecutive interior. Those are going to be the 180 degrees. So when you're going through this and you're going, oh my gosh, that's a lot of vocabulary. It's not a big deal. You're going to do really well on this. I will list some IXLs for you to practice on in Google Classroom, and you guys are going to do amazing at this.